and inclusion training. So I was glad that they invited me here to help guide the discussion. Um, wha- I'm glad that they invited me here to guide these discussions because this is something I am very passionate about, especially when we see what's currently going on in our country. And so I think it's wonderful to be an African American, seeing how well um, see the diversity in this group. In addition to seeing the diversity, but just seeing the commitment that many of you have for this cause. All right, so the biggest thing that we have to figure out is how we can start working together. And this is the whole purpose of participating in these discussions. The first thing that we need to do is that we're all different. You know, yes, yes, we might have a majority of people here are Indian, but we have different dimensions. We come from, some of us were born in America, some of us was not born in America, some of us had come from, have different socioeconomic status, educational level. So there are so many dimensions of diversity. That's why it's important for us to understand that we speak from our own experiences. Now, before we get started, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on this concept of race. Race is a social construct, something that started here in the United States. Racism, when people use the word racist, people always get confused with the word between the word racist and prejudice. Racism has to do with power. And so when we think about this concept of whiteness, that is how our founding forefathers designed this country. And it has to really do with power. Power based on this concept of race and power based on social economics, based on income. So when we think about that, we have to talk about how do those. Okay. So when we think about that, we have to start thinking about how systemic and institutional racism play a major part on why things are the way they are. When we think about that, we're thinking about legislations. We're thinking about policies. We're also thinking about how the history of how our country was designed. How do those things impact on why things are the way they are today? So the first thing, the question, I'm going to give you the questions. And the first question is, have you ever, state a time where you've experienced racism? Where it might be at your job, or it might be something that you experienced at school. How did it make you feel? So I'm going to start off. I'm a former teacher. And one thing I've always experienced being a minority teacher is that I always had to prove my competency. You know, majority of the teachers are white, middle class, heterosexual women. But as me, as a black woman, I've always had that burden where I have to prove to people all the time that I was competent to do the job. So what I want you to do, you'll have 10 minutes. If you don't feel comfortable, if you don't have a story, you can just say pass. But the biggest thing I want you to talk about is state a time where you experienced racism. How did it make you feel? Or
race or something, we should just like basically just be friends with anyone, like whether they're like a different race or like religion or anything like that. So yeah, this is just what we thought.
next group, next person.
Our group talked about both progress that can be made in workplaces as well as schools. Specifically, when it comes to workplaces, one of the ideas we talked about is becoming a leader in employee resource groups, also known as affinity groups. If there are affinity groups or employee resource groups at work, making sure to sustain those and give them the support they need. But if they aren't, then all of us are in the position, especially those in the workforce right now, to push your employer for change and to make sure that those that have historically been oppressed have a space in the workplace that is just for them. And then something we talked about also is continuing to attend events to give the movement more energy. It is very easy for this movement to die down right now, but continuing to go to events like this will make sure that the change that is needed comes soon. So that's what we talked about.
Our group talked about both how to change things on the outside and inside. So the first step is to discussion. Discussions like these, where we talk about the things that both affect us and others, are extremely important because we need to understand each other. We also need to educate ourselves by reading articles online about personal experiences. And to get involved, calling local leadership and voting, not just based on political party or swiping down the Democratic or Republican ticket, but to analyze each candidate both on the federal and the local level to see what the candidates are and whether they'll actually help you and do what you want. And to be sensitive about cultural differences and acknowledge your own biases, because everyone has biases and subtle racism in their hearts that's been projected onto them. So you have to think about, is what I'm doing right now kind of racist? If it is, to change and acknowledge that. And to respect everyone's voices and listen to, because what everyone says is valid. So that's all.
So first of all, I would like to point out that the speaker today has been a substitute teacher at my school. And during the time that she taught her class, we didn't get anything done, but she answered our questions. We talked about racism, we talked about the point at which, and this happened a few months ago, so I don't think you remember this, but that class time has been very impactful for me. And even though I don't remember your name, thank you very much. Moving on. There are many things that we can do to help. So, and it has to start from home. The parents here today can help by talking to their little children or even their adult children about the things that we go through today. We can also help by funding movements through our own money or watching YouTube videos known as fundraisers. That money goes directly to the movements. We can also talk to African Americans and ask them about their culture and what they go through. They're also human, so we need to know what everyone goes through in our life. And we can also try to support African American businesses, brands, and all the other financial supports we can do. Change power? The difference of power is what racism is, as you said before, and power equates to money and people. Change can only happen when actions happen, not when words are thrown. Thank you.
So first of all, my group, we had a really good discussion about what we've all experienced with racism. And the last person to talk first that we brought up is that health board meetings for racial health disparities are open to the public to join. And that's something that you can go to and state your opinion and state what needs to be changed in communities and how they can be changed through healthcare. We talked about how voting is very important, especially to vote in minority people who look just like me and you, who are minorities, who are women, who are all of that, so that they can understand our message that we're trying to get through. And that's another topic we talked about, is having people in power, not only in the government, but also in, the prime example was hospitals and education, so that people can be promoted to power so that they can make change. Because if we do not have people who look like you and me and talk like you and me and are minorities, we're not going to be able to make the change that we want to see. And we talked about how it's important to understand the difference between Indian racism and black racism, and how they're on completely different spectrums, and how it's important to talk in our communities, especially as Indian people, about the racism and oppression that goes on, and talk about the what seems to be like so taboo and not wanting to be talked about, is we need to have the discussions about racism so that people can understand it, and we shouldn't put it anymore upon black people to educate us about what not only us but white Americans have done to them. So that's what we talked about.
So our group tried to cover all three questions within the time frame, but the common themes were really about how all of us were raised, and we all had different perspectives of, you know, some did not experience racism while others did in various ways. So it's all based on our different experiences on how we have dealt with racism or how we've not. I would say that, you know, some of us have experienced it from just because of our names are different. And that was a prevalent theme based on our group. But, you know, again, it varied amongst our team, our members within our group. And then we talked about organizationally how either in our schools or in our companies, how diversity is thought upon. And some companies just don't even talk about diversity whatsoever or equality, whereas other organizations actually do and try to promote it in their hiring practices and how they engage employees. And then lastly, in the last question of how we actually want to exemplify Black Lives Matter, is that it's through education. Again, we all have different experiences, and we can exude those experiences and try to help those people that need that help, especially in the Black community, because these atrocities have been happening since the formation of this country, and it needs to be different, and there needs to be a change, because right now it's still the same since the formation of this country.
Thank you. So what kind of became obvious to me through our group discussion is that as Indians, we face racism, but it pales in comparison to what Black Americans have been facing. It's not even the same category. So there's three common themes that I think I'm trying to summarize, like our action plan. Three common themes that I kind of came across. One is to be politically active. It's a common theme for everybody, but it's like persistence. Constant persistence, not just like showing up once, messaging the same person over and over and over again to get your point across, and with small groups and whatnot. That's local, state, and the point was made up that this is 2020. I'm not going to say who the right person is to vote for, but we know who the wrong person is to vote for, and kind of making sure that is taking that momentum. Second is kind of integrating better socially and in the workplace with those that have been suffering, giving African Americans the opportunities that they deserve. And we can do that, somebody said, because we're a minority of privilege, if that was the right word, that we can actually incorporate them more openly into our circles and open eyes for everybody around us, and that can help them provide economic opportunities. And the third theme was revolved around volunteering, mentoring, helping those that need the help, and again, giving them the opportunities that they all deserve. That's it. Thank you.
So in our group, we talked about a few different things. Many of us work in the hospital systems, and so talking about in terms of recruitment, as well as in regard to our colleagues, trying to push for more voices in some of these boardrooms, and some trying to push for more of these minority voices in some of these boardrooms. But I think a common theme that really we came up with was that the idea of self-transformation and really looking within and trying to change ourselves, because this work isn't just today or tomorrow. This this is probably the struggle of our generation, and in order to last through that, we need to really understand how we feel in order to sustain this long term. But I think we ended up saying that ultimately there's a lot of reason for hope, and that people are still out here, people are still working, and as long as we can keep this up, perhaps there will be a better world here for our children and our children's children.
Hello, good afternoon. Our group had some really great discussions, and everyone in the group pretty much has experienced racism, but it does not compare to anything that African American people experience at all. Nobody mentioned they've had a gun pointed at them, and that seems a common theme for African American, that cops, will pull a gun at them. So in our conversations, we talked about how we really need to amplify the voices of African American people. It is important for us to help them because without the efforts of other races, they'll never be able to move up. And they will always be suffering and always have the same experiences that they're experiencing right now. We also talked about that it's very important to educate ourselves and continue the education, and then also putting in effort to help the community and to help people, help the African American Black community in being a mentor, helping them move up in their positions at work and things like that. Thank you.
Our group mainly talked about racism in schools because everyone in our group was, going to school in majority white schools. So we talked about some solutions. A lot of them were about, being comfortable with being different and how to, make more of a larger community for non-white groups in schools. So one of our solutions was to make a school club. So one of our group members actually, they already have a club, Asian American club in their school. So that is just where people share their experiences in a white majority school about, what made them uncomfortable, what made them proud, stuff like that. And that the club in his school actually, they organize events. Like say for Chinese New Year, they bring out prop dragon for Diwali. They brought out diyas, stuff like that, to make people more comfortable with being different. We also talked about not enforcing stereotypes. In our experiences, we've been lucky that we haven't had too many, big experiences with racism, but just it's the little things that count. So just don't enforce stereotypes. Another thing you can do to help end racism in schools is call people out when they're being racist or if they're favoring someone over someone else, enforcing a stereotype, stuff like that.
Thank you. So our group was fairly diverse professionally. We had a dentist, a couple lawyers, a physician, an advocate for special needs. So I think one of the themes that emerged was making sure that we're all in positions of privilege or in positions of making decisions, that we make sure that our hiring practices are as fair, that we can amplify Black voices. If you sit on committees or boards, make sure that there's a proportional representation of all voices and that we don't sort of self-segregate on those boards. Even though most of us are not white, we still carry implicit biases. So you want to make sure that you check your own implicit biases. And again, recognize your own privilege. Sometimes we sort of conflate our experience with the sort of the people of color term, but it's important to acknowledge, as many of us already have today, that that the experience for the Black American is far different than it might be for the Indian American. Personally, I'm also in charge of some curriculum for our trainees at my institution, and we'll make sure that we include anti-racist readings within that curriculum. Things that everybody can do, you can donate. There's a lot of good causes out there. You can donate to those causes. You can order from Black-owned restaurants. You can encourage, be a customer at Black-owned businesses. And every single person in this audience can call your representative. So call Senator Portman tonight. So.